the four fundamentals of flying. So to control your aircraft, there are four basic maneuvers you have to master. All the other maneuvers you're going to be learning will be dealing with these four different flight maneuvers. So the first one is straight and level flight. And it's exactly that. The aircraft is flying straight on a heading, on one heading, and it's at an altitude and it's staying there. So we want to do straight and level flight. That's one. The next one are turns, either left or right turns. The third one are climbs, and the fourth fundamental is descents. So each one of these we'll go through. I'm going to show you first off what we're going to do is demonstrate a turn to show you how that works. So in the cockpit here, we have a control yoke. On the virtual cockpit, we can see our control yoke. I'm just going to unpause our sim right now. We also have in front of us, we've got a control yoke, the physical yoke that we use to control the SciSim, and that corresponds to the yoke that you're seeing on the screen, this one right here. So you can see as I turn my aircraft or turn my yoke on the SciSim to the right, the yoke here in the sim turns to the right and the aircraft banks to the right then. So to do a turn correctly, we want to stay at an altitude. So we'll choose an altitude. And let's say we want to do a left bank. So let's say let's first off get our altitude set here. This involves a bit of trimming here. That's the trim wheel we're going to use, and all I'm going to do is just try to hold it there. So, all right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into a left bank, but I'm going to try to keep my altitude at that 1,700 feet there. So I'm going to do a slight turn. Again, I'm turning my control yoke to the left, and as I go into a turn, there's a couple things that are happening here. We're going to start losing a little bit of altitude unless I pull back a little bit on the control yoke to generate sufficient lift to keep it at that altitude there. If I don't do that, if I just turn the aircraft or go into a bank, it's going to slowly start to descend. And that is because the aircraft is we're not producing sufficient lift to keep it at our altitude. And the only way we can get that altitude back up is either by adding power or by pulling back on the control yoke a little bit. So, all right. So that is a left turn. Let's do a turn to the right. So this time I'm going to turn my control yoke that's in front of me, the physical one. I'm going to turn that to the right here. Again, look at how little pressure that I'm putting on the control yoke there. This is exactly what it would look like in real life. You'd actually have very little pressure on that control yoke there. And I'm pulling back. So that is turns to the left and right. That's one of the four fundamentals. So let's go straight and level here for a second. All right. And I want to keep my aircraft above roughly about 1,700 feet. I'm going to pull back just a little bit on the control yoke there to get it to climb a bit. All right, so now the next one we're going to demonstrate are climbs. So to do a climb, the simplest thing to do is, this is our tachometer right here, our RPM gauge, that tells us how much thrust we're producing through the engine. So the more I push in this black knob right here, which is our throttle, the more thrust we're going to produce. That knob is also on the throttle quadrant on your SciSim on the physical portion. If you look over to your right of the yoke, there, the control yoke, you'll see three knobs. One's a black knob, a blue knob, and a red knob. The only two we use in the sim are really just the black knob and the red knob for the Cessna 172. So the black knob is our throttle. So now watch, I'm going to go ahead and push my throttle in on the sim, on the controls here. And you can see on the simulator, it actually simulates, it shows the throttle increasing. So what's happening now is we're increasing our speed, it's producing more lift. Now we have excess thrust and we're actually going into a climb. I could do the same thing. I'm going to pull my throttle back here a little bit here, you can watch that. So I could do the same thing just by pulling back on my control yoke. So watch this. I'm just going to pull back on my control yoke and you can see the aircraft is now climbing. Okay. That's a climb. And to hold it in that, I'm going to probably have to hold my control yoke back if I want to take those or get it so it just stays in a climb, I'm going to use my trim wheel, which is right here. And you'll notice also on your throttle quadrant, there's a little wheel there. That's this trim wheel. That's what it corresponds to. That adjusts the aircraft itself, the pitch of the aircraft, so that we don't constantly have to hold back on the control yoke when we're going into a climb, or vice versa when we're going into a descent. So that's a climb. Again, to go into a climb, the simplest thing to do is just to pull back on the control yoke a little bit here. Let's actually see if we can show our yoke there. So let's try again here. I'm going to push the yoke in. You can barely see it registering on the sim there, but it is moving back and forth there. So what I'm going to do now is, again, I'm going to pull back on that control yoke. We now are going into a climb, and it's very slight. And this is the way it would be in a real aircraft too. It doesn't take much pressure to get that aircraft to go into a climb. The faster you're going, the more responsive the aircraft is going to be. So the same thing goes for a descent. If I want to descend, I'm going to push my control yoke in. I'm going to push this control yoke inward like that. So let's do this. I'm just going to push it in. You can see the yoke going in. Instantly, the first thing that happens is the nose starts pitching toward the ground. That's a descent. And if I want to hold that descent, I'll just hold my control yoke there. I might have to keep adding a little bit of forward pressure on that yoke to keep it in a descent there. A couple things are happening when you go into a descent and climbs. When you go into a climb, one of the first things you're going to find out is you're going to start to lose some airspeed. Now that's fine as long as you stay above the bottom of the green arc there. You don't want to. What's going to happen if you go too slow? If you get too slow, the aircraft is going to stall. It's probably going to go into a spin, and if you don't recover from it, you'll crash. So in the simulator, all we have to do if we're losing too much speed. So here I'm just going to pull my throttle back here and actually go into a climb. Now watch my airspeed indicator right up here. Watch that right there. So I'm just going to keep pulling back on my control yoke and see how it's bleeding off airspeed there. If at some point we get to our stall speed, the aircraft is just going to go into a stall. The wings are going to stop producing sufficient lift to keep it in the air at that altitude, and it's going to start descending, or it's going to nose down because it wants to start flying again. So what we want to do there is obviously either add throttle or decrease the pitch of the aircraft, or relax the pressure on the control yoke. So let's go ahead and add full throttle again here. I've got full throttle now, and now watch our airspeed is increasing because I've added more thrust right there. You can see the thrust or the airspeed is increasing. That's because we've got full throttle there. Okay, so in a descent, the simplest thing to do with a descent is just to bring your throttle back and let the plane descend on its own. So if I just pull my throttle back, let's take a look at my RPM gauge here. Again, that indicates how much thrust the engine is producing. And notice as I pull my throttle back, the plane just naturally wants to descend. And you can do descents that way, or the other thing you can do is actually push the nose down to go into a descent. So let me just reset our flight here. This is now we're on approach at Baraboo again. This is a default situation here. So in this case, we want to get down to this little area right here. So to descend to that, what I want to do is bring my throttle back to about 1600 RPM right here. And then you'll notice the nose is slowly, without me even touching the yoke, the nose is going to start dropping through the horizon there. You can see now it's starting to descend there. That's because it's not producing sufficient lift. So we just want to keep it right there. Very easy to do a descent. Again, the biggest problem is overspeed. If you point that nose down and you have lots of thrust, your aircraft is going to go very fast, and you might even get to the point where you go past the red line on the aircraft, which is the never exceed speed for an aircraft, and that's there for a reason. Obviously, if you take the aircraft beyond that, you might actually warp the wings or do something even worse there. So all right, so we'll come in for a landing here. I'm just going to bring my throttle all the way back now, and I'm just going to hold off on the control yoke. We're still descending there, very slight. I'm going to hold it back, hold it back, hold it back, and there we go. And we're down. Okay, so let me just pause here, put brakes on here. Okay, so again, the four fundamentals of flying are you've got straight and level flight, you've got turns, and you have climbs and then descents. Now, the one we didn't show you was straight and level flight. This one is probably the hardest to do for any duration of time. So if you're not used to flying, one of the problems you'll have is just maintaining a heading and altitude. So right now, let's go ahead and turn a little bit here. I'm going to turn on to a heading of north. We're almost on north right now. Let's see. Let's go ahead, and we want to get on a heading of north here, and we're at about 1,300 feet, which is pretty low, but we're going to stay there for now just to demonstrate this. So I want to maintain that heading of north. So that means I want to keep my wings level. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to try to maintain 1,300 feet for the next 5 minutes. Now, I won't do that here, but if you start to see the aircraft descend, pull back a little bit on the yoke. It doesn't take much. You can see here, I'm falling a little bit below 1,300, so I'm going to pull back just a little bit, let it climb back up to the top. And again, I'm also watching my direction here. We're still in a heading of north here. Now, another thing you can do is use your trim control. That's a little wheel in front of you. If you adjust that very slightly, you can actually take your hands off the yoke pretty much and let the plane fly itself. So I'm just very lightly touching my control or my trim wheel. I'm actually rotating it downward so that the plane will pitch nose up a little bit more. And then we can take our hands off the control yoke. We don't necessarily have to have our hands on it while we're doing it, other than to maintain wings level here. And notice our direction is still 100 or to the north there. So you would do this when you're taking your test. You have to demonstrate that you can fly straight and level, and you want to practice this for 5 minutes straight, because there are a lot of things that change over time. If you add power, like right now, if I add power, what's going to happen is the nose is going to pitch up. So I've got full power now. See how the nose is pitching up? I'm not even touching the yoke there, and it's pitching up. So the same thing, we'll move it back down. So if I reduce power, the nose is going to drop down. So again, 4 fundamentals of flying. Those different maneuvers, basically you have to master those in order to do all the other maneuvers.